Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, and on this channel I talk about anything and everything that has to do with yoga. And today I'm going to do a quick little book review on one of my favorite yoga books of all time, Light on Yoga by BKS Iyengar. It is considered to be the Bible of yoga by a lot of practitioners. And by the end of this video, you're going to know a little bit about this author. You're going to see what the basic contents are and why every yoga practitioner should have one of these in their library. Iyengar was an author and a teacher, and he is considered to be one of the world's foremost yoga teachers. He has definitely been one of the most influential yoga teachers of all time, probably in the history of the world. I love Iyengar's story because he is like the classic underdog who turns into a superstar. He was born the 11th of 13 children in 1918. And he was born during a flu pandemic in India. And he contracted the virus as an infant, and it left his immune system weakened. So he spent the majority of his childhood very sickly. He went through several bouts of malaria, tuberculosis, and typhoid fever. He was also very malnourished, and in one of his books, he describes himself as with very spindly limbs and a protruding belly. And at age 15, his brother-in-law invited him to come study yoga at his school. His brother-in-law turns out to be also another yoga teacher superstar, Krishnamacharya. After just 3 years of intense study with Krishnamacharya, Iyengar became a yoga teacher and started spreading the word of yoga around India. He's also known for being a yoga teacher to some famous superstars. In 1966, he wrote his first book, you guessed it, this one. And it was instantly an international bestseller. Since it was published in 1966, it's been published in at least 23 different languages, and over 3 million copies have been sold worldwide. Iyengar went on to live a long and healthy life, and he died when he was 96 years old. And in an interview in his 90s, he said, I think he was 90 years old, he said that he was still practicing yoga 3 hours per day. So I like Iyengar's story because it's such an incredible journey from being sickly and malnourished to living to your late 90s. And I think that one of the things that makes a great yoga teacher is how big of an obstacle they had to overcome. I find that those that have overcome or that have taken on the largest transformation are the ones that make the best teachers. And honestly, it's because a lot of people don't really find the depths of yoga until they're really desperate for that transformation, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual. People need to really, really want to find the depths of yoga in order to get there. In Iyengar's book, Light on Life, he writes, "My poor health was matched, as often is when one is sick, by my poor mind. A deep melancholy overtook me, and at times I asked myself whether life was worth the trouble of living." So you can see Iyengar was really just in a state that needed a total turnaround, and that's when he found yoga. So I first found this book when I started taking group yoga classes. And before I started taking group yoga classes, I had taken one group class, and then I was in graduate school, and so it really, actually I think it was in undergrad. I don't know. I know I couldn't afford to continue taking classes, so I got VHS tapes and I did videos at home. And I was doing that videos probably 3 or 4 times a week on my own for probably 2 to 3 years before I went regularly to group yoga classes. So I started going to group classes, and probably, I don't know, just a week or two in, I don't really remember, I was walking in the same direction as my teacher, and I was talking about, I'd really like to practice more, but I can't, make all the times, and I don't know how to practice at home. And so he said something about this book, and I was like, oh, it never even occurred to me that there would be yoga books. I don't know why, or maybe I just didn't know where to start. And he was like, yeah, man, it's the Bible of yoga. You have to get that. That's the first book you need. And I was like, okay. And I literally walked to Barnes & Noble down the street, picked up my first copy, and went home and kind of, indulged in the first, 50 something pages. So it was awesome. I read the introduction to the book, and I was just like, right? I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And I couldn't believe that all these years of kind of reading spiritual books, kind of trying to understand, all sorts of things, like a little bit of Wayne Dyer, a little bit of Carlos Castaneda, a little bit of, whatever. And don't forget, like, for me, looking through for spirituality, this was like in the 90s. And so, like the Celestine prophecy was like a big thing. And so I thought that was really cool. But there just wasn't, I didn't know. And I didn't know anything about yoga until I went to a class. And then when this is the stuff that you don't get in class, because you can't. It's too much. It's deep. And that's why people go to teacher training, to learn more about yoga. But, for beginners, this is a great place to start. It is considered to be like the authority on DIY home practice yoga. So as soon as I got this book, I read the introduction and I was like, oh, the heavens opened up for me, and I started practicing at home. Oh yeah, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button below, subscribe to my channel. Okay, so let me get into why I love this book. Okay, first of all, I like Iyengar's style of writing because he's just a straight shooter. He just says it like it is, and there's no fluff. There's no real added commentary, because the way he talks is just so from his own experience that you can tell it's real. So I like that about him. He's just straightforward. And I feel like when you just read it and take it for what it is at face value, it makes so much more sense. I will say some of the challenges as a beginner when you read this book, it's got a lot of Sanskrit terminology in it. But he puts it in parentheses and then states the English. So it's kind of like an introduction to the Sanskrit, but at the same time, it can be a lot. It's almost distracting. So I would say if you get the book, the first time you read through the introduction where he talks about all the cool shit in yoga, I would, kind of ignore a lot of the Sanskrit. It's a little distracting. But at the same time, when you read it again and again and again, because you're not going to get this the first time you read it through. Like, let me caveat that. Yoga is just so vast, and this is condensed version, that it'll make sense, but at the same time, don't expect to like absorb it all the first time you read it. But let me talk about what I love about the book. So first of all, any person that can summarize what is yoga in a page and a half is a genius. Okay, let's just say that. And he does that in a page and a half. Anybody can pick up this book, read the first page and a half, and know exactly what yoga is. It's amazing. Then he talks about the stages of yoga. And Patanjali, if you haven't heard of Patanjali, it's okay. But there's another written piece, an older ancient text written by Patanjali that talks about the 8 stages of yoga. Patanjali calls it the 8 limbs of yoga. So those are kind of interchangeable. And Iyengar then, the next several pages, goes into what the 8 stages of yoga are. And he just talks about them in a concise way. And it's a way that the beginner can just digest the information and be like, oh, okay, I understand this. This is cool. And it's in such a way that you can understand how deeply spiritual the practice is, but at the same time, if you are if you have a religious belief system, you don't get the sense that they are one or the other. You get more of the sense that, oh, there's a lot of overlap, or it can be kind of like another layer to your spirituality or belief system. The majority of this book, so this book is not thin, okay, it's pretty thick. It's got over 540 something pages in it. Oh no, 540 something. The meat of the book, I'll show you some of them aren't as scary. Some of the poses in here, not things that I can do. Not if I want to walk the next day anyway. Let's see. Most of the book looks, geez, he makes everything look a little, Okay, here we go. Here's an easy one. All right, so you can see he's in Warrior 2 here, but he gives, a description on how to get into it, how you should breathe, and even kind of like the next, you can see here he's preparing to get into Warrior 3. And so he gives you step-by-step instructions, which I think a lot of the newer, more modern books, they do this as well. But frankly, I just love how old and weird this book is. I mean, look, it's from the 60s. This guy's like amazing. Yeah, and there's just some weird stuff. I just opened to this randomly. Like lion's breath, right? Who doesn't want to try this stuff? That's crazy looking, but I love it. I love it. And these are like this is like some of the good stuff in yoga, to be honest with you. And he leaves nothing out. That's what's amazing. He shows all the different variations of each of the poses, and he does them. I mean, he does them like a rock star. He's like the original, yoga celebrity. Anyway, after he gets through, well over 200 yoga poses, and I don't know how many with the variations. I mean, look at this guy. Amazing. Okay? Amazing. Once he gets through this, in here he talks about, he's talking about the asanas. He's also talking about bandhas, which are like the energetic locks inside the body that help you hold the poses. And those things are often overlooked in general group yoga classes, and especially in the video yoga classes. Those things are just not found. And those are the things that make your yoga practice more energetically beneficial, and they take you to the next level. So those bandhas and the breath work those are like the foundation of what takes you to the next level. So he talks about some hints and cautions before. So the next section, all right, so part 3. So part 1 is the introduction, okay, and that's this much of the book, right? The rest of it, right, he gives a good section on pranayama, or breath control, and gives specific guidance and very specific exercises for the beginner to start with. And that was my first introduction to, like, wow, there's more to yoga than just the poses and chanting Om before class. Amazing. So then after that, he has what he calls asana courses. So if you have like a certain issue, like he's got primary, intermediate, and advanced courses, and he's got like a series of poses to do on your first week, a series of poses to do on your second week, third week, all the way up to 15 weeks. All right, so 15 weeks. And then after that, he's got, when you finish the course, then you do by days of the week, and he's got different poses to complete. So it's very interesting the way he's got this laid out. And I think the courses are difficult. I never used them because they're just written in Sanskrit. And so if you're a beginner, you look at the Sanskrit and you're like, then you got to go back in the book and find the picture. And it's hard to use. Maybe if they had like some pull-out cards that you could kind of lay them out in a sequence, that would be a little bit more beneficial, but it's just not. In the end, Appendix 2, he talks about curative asanas for various diseases. Okay, I think this is super cool for anyone who has, you know, specific health issues they need to address, and you haven't quite gone through a teacher training or learned enough about yoga to create your own. This is a great place to start. So I'm going to stop there because I could talk about Iyengar and his teachings for a long time. He's one of my favorite writers and favorite teachers. However, I will say one of the cons about this book is that for the newbie, there's a lot of Sanskrit and it can be a little overwhelming. I say just overlook it at first and go for the English. The other con, which is kind of a glaring elephant in the room for most modern yogis, is the fact that a lot of his claims for health are unfounded. I mean, not unfounded, but there's no scientific proof. But let me say that this book was written in the 60s from a man living in India, and so at the time, that's, you know, that was acceptable. Nowadays, you know, it's just not acceptable. But I take it for what it's worth, and it is just, this is like a lifetime achievement, and it was just his first book. It's amazing. I think everybody who wants to start a yoga practice or who has a yoga practice, if you don't already have this book, you should get one now. All right, that's it. Thanks for staying to the end. I really appreciate your support. If you haven't already, hit the like button below and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one.